Every September, when we, like a lot of churches, tend to do a series that brings us back to what our church is all about, what's most important to us, what oftentimes you'll hear called our mission or our vision. And this year, our series is focused on the subject of motivation. That is, what is it that motivates us? So I want you to think for a minute, and it can be recently, just to give you a time frame. Think of an episode or an occurrence in your life recently when you were very motivated to do something. Got one? Now, let me take a guess. Sometimes you were very motivated to do what you thought of because you liked it. It was something you enjoy. It was a hobby. And that's what motivated you to do that. Okay? Or you felt obligated. Not in a bad way, but you knew that whatever it was that you needed to do fell within your duty or your obligation. It was expected of you to do it, so you did it. And even that motivated you to do it, okay? Or maybe it was your heart, your compassion. There was a need, a tangible, practical need that someone around you or a friend had, and in that moment, spontaneously, you felt like, I am motivated to do something about it, or say something, or help in a certain way. Okay? Probably. A few weekends ago was Eli's first football game, and there I'm up with Shiloh in the stands at Granville Middle School watching Eli play, and late in the fourth quarter, they're losing, which is not a surprise for his football team. And my son's out there playing defense, and I notice after the play that there's a Granville kid writhing in pain on the ground. And then I notice it's Eli. And I'm like, oh man, drama queen, get up, will you? No, really, I didn't. So he starts to limp off of the field, and I can tell he's totally favoring one of his legs. And being an old football player myself and having some training in sports medicine, I'm like, okay, the good news here is maybe he sprained his ankle. The bad news here is he tore something in his knee. So in that moment, I felt all three of those motivations that I described to you. I'm obligated, I'm his dad, I should go check on him, right? But of course, he's my son. I love him. And he's also one of my great hobbies. So in that moment, I am motivated by all three of these things to walk down out of the stands and get as close to the sidelines as I can and check on him. And as you'll see today after the service, when he rampages all through the bounce house and the basketball court, his knee is fine. But here's the thing. Liking to do something, feeling compassion about something, or moved by your emotions to do something, or even feeling obligation to do something, those are good short-term motivators. Those are all poor long-term motivators. If you want to do something that's important to you, or you feel like you should, and you want to stay motivated at it over the long haul, you have to find different ways to be motivated. In the first week of this series, we talked about the science of motivation and how science, psychology, sociology, etc., have discovered that if you want to stay motivated long-term at anything that's important to you, it has to include those three things up on the screen. These are chiefly important to you being motivated. It has to give you purpose, connect you to something bigger outside of yourself. You have to exercise mastery, which means it has to be something you can grow at. Your aptitude should increase over time. It doesn't stay static. And last, it needs to be self-directed. You don't need someone to hold your hand. You don't need someone to set the course for you. You get to decide a lot of the what and the how and the when of what you do. And if you put these three things in place, odds are you're going to stay motivated at whatever it is we're talking about for much longer. So last week, we began to put our attention on what Jesus says are the two most important things any human being can build their life around. His two most important spiritual instructions or maxims to us, what we call the two great commandments. First, Jesus says, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Awesome. He says that's the first great commandment. If you want to stay motivated at that, at your relationship with God, in your spiritual vitality over the long haul of your life, then, as we explored last week, you have to go after this commandment with purpose, mastery, and self-direction. And as a church, we want to set you up for that. In fact, later today, you're going to do a little questionnaire that will give us some information to help you do that. The Bible has a word for what that is. You need to see yourself as Jesus' disciple. You are not merely a Christian. You are not merely a believer in Jesus. Anyone who comes to Jesus needs to understand they came to follow him. They came to sit at his feet and learn from him, or the Bible's word for that is, they came to be a disciple. Now we're going to turn our attention today to get your imagination perked up. We're going to have you think about the second great commandment in the same way. If you, as a follower of Jesus, want to claim the second great commandment as one of the most important spiritual parts of your life, to love your neighbor as yourself, you have to do that over the long haul with purpose, mastery, and self-direction, or it's not going to work. If we as a church, as we talk about often, want to be a love your neighbor kind of church, the only way we will be able to do that over the long haul is to do it with purpose, mastery, and self-direction. So let's explore today what it would look like for you and I and us together to love our neighbors with these three key ingredients so that we can stay motivated at what Jesus calls the most important things in life. Loving our neighbors with purpose. Remember what purpose is. By definition, purpose puts you in contact with or attaches you to something greater than yourself. It's a cause that's worthwhile and bigger than you. Loving your neighbor with purpose is actually built to do just that. When you actively engage yourself in caring for the people who are actually around you in your life, people that Jesus calls your neighbors, you are intentionally expanding your universe. It's getting bigger than just you. Now, that may not sound very profound, but you have to understand that Jesus' second great commandment is the antidote to a universal human problem. And it is a universal human problem that not only Christianity identifies. The social sciences, psychology, identify the same problem that your Christian scriptures do. You know how a psychologist would call the great problem of most human beings? The clinical term for it is the ego. Every person in the room here today has a sense of me, or I, of self. And it's healthy for you too. You need to know who you are. You need to know what your past is. You need to know what has shaped you to this point. You need to know what you really care about. You need to know what you like. You need to know what you dislike. You need to know what your God-given personality is. All these things are part of yourself or your I. The problem with the human race is we live with an inflated I. Think of it this way. This is how, again, psychology would describe it. This is not the Scripture, but the Scripture totally agrees with it. Here's how psychology describes it. Every human being in the world has an I, and they live among yous. And the problem is our I is gigantic, and the yous around you are really small, oftentimes. Or, here's another way they'll say it. We live in a world where you have what's yours, you call it mine. Mine. my things, my family, my job, it's mine. And then you live in a world where everybody else has yours or theirs. And guess what? Oftentimes, when we're not careful, the mine is 120-point font. And the yours is 8-point font. What loving your neighbor does is it forces you outside of yourself and the inflated ego that all of us, to one degree or another, struggle with. Here's how strong the human ego can be. Oftentimes, the people who are not a part of your immediate family aren't real to you. Here's what I mean. You think your ideas are fantastic. You think your solutions to problems are the thing that would work in any given situation, in any given family. But when somebody else has a solution to a problem that you're grappling with, it's not nearly as real as yours. Okay? Your needs, when they hit you, when you are in emotional distress, or when you have a practical need that you can't figure out how to fix, they dominate your thoughts, your time, your attention. And the most that happens when the same kind of need occurs in somebody else's life is you may feel a slight emotional tickle down in that place we call your soul. And maybe you write a card, maybe you slip them a Big gift card to go get coffee, but surely you don't care about their needs as much as you do yours when they occur. When you're in conversation with somebody, you're paying far more attention to what you say or what you could say than you are listening to them. You love it when you have recognition. You struggle sometimes deep down when somebody else is recognized and you feel like you haven't been recognized enough. We live in a world where oftentimes the other people around us are mere illusions to us. They are less than whole. They are less than the full people we consider ourselves. This is a universal human problem. And the genius of Jesus is, if you are willing to take the risk of loving your neighbors the way that you wish yourself was loved, it will expand your universe. It is the great antidote to the ego problem of the human race. There is no greater cause, there is no greater purpose to which he can call you than to expand your eyes and where you think your time and your energy needs to go outside of what is yours to the rest of the world that is just as real as you, full of people that he loves as much as he loves you. Fundamentally, your scripture makes a point of connection between the two great commandments that you and I need to keep in mind, because it speaks to purpose. This is how John writes it in his first letter, chapter 4, verses 7 and 8 and 20 and 21. Catch the connection. John writes, "My dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love doesn't know God, because God is love. Whoever claims to love God and yet hates a brother or a sister is a liar. For whoever does not love their brother or their sister, whom they can see, surely cannot love God, who they cannot see. And God has given us this commandment: anybody who loves him must also love their brother and their sister." I don't think any of us would argue. If you have a relationship with God, you know how deeply that grounds you. You know how that stands at the very center of your existence. Everything around you may change, but that does not. It is the anchor that holds. There is no greater sense of purpose being drawn outside of yourself than loving the God of all things, who was and is to come. The God who loves every tribe and every person and always will. We all agree that's a life of purpose. Did you hear what John said? You cannot love that God if you are not willing to love the people around you. It doesn't work. Don't speak to me about your spiritual devotion unless you speak to me also to your devotion to your neighbors. These are the words of John. You want purpose in your life? Do you want to find God in your life? Then you need to open your eyes, diminish your ego, and let the people around you be fully real. And realize that they have needs and that they need you. And the more you invest yourself in them, the more you prioritize them, the more you will find the God you seek. This is what John said. If you and I wanted to be motivated as a church and as individuals to love our neighbor the way Jesus told us to, you have to see the big picture and see how this draws you outside of yourself and gives you a life of purpose. The second key piece of long-term motivation is what's called mastery. You have to grow at it. It has to develop. You have to learn it. You have to progress over time at it. I believe that it can be quantifiably identified that human beings, every one of us, are born with the instinct to love. The reason it's there is because the God who is love made us in his image. Don't believe me? Watch a mother and her infant. Watch a mother and a baby who isn't her infant. The instinct to love is hardwired into human beings. And yes, that giant ego of ours skews it and warps it and makes it not work the way that it should, but it's in there. You know what it's like to care for somebody in their time of need. You know what it's like to encourage somebody when they're downtrodden or low. You know what it's like to feel the instinct to want to do something for somebody when it seems like nobody else can. You get that. It is part of what makes us uniquely human. But here's the thing. You have to learn how to do it better and better. The instinct is not enough. The instinct is going to prompt you to act. The instinct is not going to prompt you to act wisely. You get the difference? For those of you who have been a part of our church for some time, reflect with me, if you would, on the way that we have grown in the way that we love our neighbors. Just 4 or 5 years ago, it was not uncommon for us to do a big event that cost us hundreds of dollars, if not $1,000, like, for instance, a back-to-school giveaway at a trailer park in Byron Center, where we did a thing like we're going to do today after the service for the people there. But there was no real relational investment on our part in that community. It was more of a flyby. It was a charity flyby. Here we are, people who have something that we think you may need, and so we're going to come by on one Saturday, and we're going to give it to you, and then we're going to wave goodbye, and if you'd like to come to our church sometime in the forthcoming weeks, knock yourself out. And I'm not saying that there wasn't good done there. I'm saying we're way smarter about it now. Because now we know that it's much more about the interpersonal investment that we make in our actual neighbors in our life. As we get to know them and care for them, we learn their actual needs, and then we can use the money we set aside so much better. I suspect that you've seen the same growth in your life. As we've talked about this over and over, and we cycle through it time and again, and we do things, we do series or we do small group studies, giving you the tools to do it better, I'll bet you can identify in your own life that you have grown in mastery about it. Now you know, oh yeah, I don't just want to pay somebody's bill, I want to set them up for success. If they don't have enough money coming in and their bills are too high, me giving them one check is not going to fix this. What I have to do is help them figure out what the plan is. Maybe I need to start in their life by helping with physical needs so that at some point in my relationship with them, we can move on to more substantial needs, like their emotional needs, their spiritual needs. But sure, I'll start with a physical need first because that's the most pressing. Maybe you've gained skills like that too. We as a church have grown a lot in how we know how to love our neighbors. And we would be wise to continue that process. And you. Could you identify for yourself, where is it that I think I can grow in how I love the people around me? Maybe it's the people I'm in a small group here. Maybe it's the people at my kids' school. Maybe it's a neighbor in my actual neighborhood that I am trying to reach out to. Where is it that I need to grow in how I care for them or how I understand them or even my relationship with them? Great. That's where you need to go next. We always want to be gaining skills and aptitudes so that years later we realize, wow, we are so much better at this now than we were. You see it? Mastery. We are living proof that mastery is long-term motivation at the most important things in life. And we would be wise to continue to do that. Here's the last one. If you and I want to be second great commandment Christians, if you and I want to be a second great commandment church, then we have to love our neighbors with self-direction. Self-direction. Let me reiterate to you a very famous story Jesus tells in Luke chapter 10, in which he gives this great commandment. It's one of several places in the Gospels that he does. We call this story the story of the Good Samaritan. So you know the story, I'm going to guess, even if you're not a particularly churched person or not that literate in the Bible, you've probably heard the gist of this story. A man goes out taking a trip between Jericho and Jerusalem in modern-day Israel. He's mugged, and he's left for dead. Two religious leaders pass by this guy, and for what to them seem like very appropriate religious leaders don't go near him because they think he's dead. And they don't want to be spiritually unclean. And then the worst of the worst, the kind of person that no Israelite in Jesus' day would have liked, a Samaritan, comes by, takes it upon himself to take care of this beaten, broken, destitute man, takes him to a nearby inn, tells the innkeeper, you have the doctor come see him, you put him up as long as necessary, and you just run me a tab. And when I come back through this way, I will take care of it for you. So here's my question to you as you hear the gist of that story. What was the first thing that had to happen in order for that story to go the way that it did? Now, you might think to yourself, the guy had to get mugged. Okay, yeah. Nope. That is not the first thing that had to happen. You know what had to happen first for that story to play out the way that it did? That Good Samaritan, that worst of the worst, had to wake up that morning with the virtue in place that he was going to love his neighbors. If it wasn't there, if that attitude, that value, that priority wasn't there, he'd have been the third guy to go by. He woke up knowing, I, in my life, care most about my neighbors when I see them in need, small or big, and I can do something about it. And so for him, it was natural. This is not a surprise that when he sees the man on the road, he says, yes, this is my chance to get outside of myself and to meet a need that really now only I can meet. If you live like the Good Samaritan and you wake up every day committed to the principle that you are going to care for the neighbors that you encounter every day at your workplace or elsewhere in your life, if you do that, then you can experience what he did. And what did he experience? The adventure of allowing God to direct you spontaneously to the neighbors around you and their needs. See, here's the thing. I can't tell you what your neighbors need. We haven't talked about your neighbors. I don't know your neighbors the way that you do. What I do know is, if you have the value in place that you are going to invest your free time and some of your energy into your neighbors, God is going to use that the way you saw in the story of the Good Samaritan. What an extraordinary chance you and I have. You get to wake up every day and say, God, I don't know what this day holds. I know I'm driving to work. I know I'm working my 9 to 5, and I know I'm coming home. I know there's chili in the crock pot. I know I got to help my daughter with her geometry, or try. And I know I got to try to get my kids in bed right around 9 or 9:30 or 10. This is what I know my day holds. Oh, but the cool thing is, I wonder what you have in store for my day. I'm going to go through my day seeing my kids' friends, seeing my coworkers, seeing the clerk at the gas station, seeing my wife or my husband at home. And from Jesus' vantage point, those are all my neighbors. And I get to have the great adventure of figuring out how you want me to love them today. You want to see the human race work the way it's supposed to? Every single solitary one of us wakes up with the motive inside to care for the others around us as neighbors. Your needs get met, my needs get met, nothing goes undone. This is God's vision and dream for the race that He started so long ago. This could be your life. You could have a life like the Good Samaritan. How do you think he felt at the end of the story? He was poor, I'll tell you that. I don't know what doctors and inns cost in his day. In our day, assuming that guy did not have insurance and the government wasn't covering the bill, we're talking about thousands of dollars that the Good Samaritan shelled out for a Motel 6 and a doctor in the emergency room. Thousands of dollars. Oh, do you think he felt poor? No way. That Good Samaritan would tell you, I'm the richest man you know, because I am on mission with God in the world to restore this place to be a love your neighbor community. That's what you and I can do. What we want to do as a church is set you up to do that. I don't want to tell you who you should love. I don't want to tell your small group what you should do, how you should do it, why you should do it, when you should do it. Truth be told, you need to be seeking God's leading about that. You don't need to look to me for that. I have the neighbors that I care for. This is my group of neighbors in part. And every time somebody here is in need or wants to have coffee or has a question, that's what I do. It is my way of neighborly love. But you don't need me to tell you. You just need to be motivated together to do it. Part of what we're going to transition our small groups to here, as you'll read on the green sheets on your chairs, is that we want you to begin to consider what you'd like to do together. And then tell us, and we'll see who else wants to join in. But we want you to be self-motivated or self-directed in doing it. You know what the danger is in this, by the way? I'll go ahead and spill the beans on why many pastors don't, or many churches don't ever want to do this. They're afraid nobody's going to do anything. They're afraid that if we do things the right way or the best way, which is to allow you to be self-directed, you won't be. I'm willing to take that risk. You should have the church that you want. You should have the church that you're motivated to have. And I believe you are. So I am unafraid. You tell us how you would like to love your neighbors. You tell us what we'd like to do together, what your group would like to do together. And then we will get on board to give you the tools and the assets necessary to do it. If you and I want to be love your neighbor Christians long term, if you and I want to do this together long term, it requires us being self-directed, which means really allowing God to direct us like He did the Good Samaritan. This is crucial to living in a neighborly love kind of way. I want to end today with these two quotes, which will help pull down into 2 bullet points some of the key facets of this second great commandment that Jesus gives us. The first is by someone who wrote an extraordinary book that I'm grateful to someone here who lent it to me, on mass movements. Not a particularly Christian person, and yet see if in this quote he doesn't nail what really is part of the problem that we all fundamentally have with trying to live a love your neighbor kind of life. His name is Eric Hoffer. And he says very simply, it is so much easier to love humanity as a whole than it is to love your neighbors. Ain't that the truth? You want to know why people don't want to live this way? You want to know why people want to go to faith communities like churches where the focus is someplace else? Because neighborly love, when you really get after it, is hard work. And there's no easy way to do it. There's no fast way to do it. He's right. It is so much easier to talk about love. It is so much easier to talk about loving people. It is so much harder to actually love your neighbors. And if you're thinking, boy, this whole love your neighbor thing, I'm invigorated by it, I'm intrigued by it, I can so begin to see the genius of Jesus in it and how deep and how powerful it would be in any life if they embraced it. But I'm scared of it, or I don't feel that loving, quite frankly. And I want to leave you with this little piece of advice from one of the 20th century's greatest thinkers within Christianity, a guy named C.S. Lewis, who wrote so aptly, do not waste time bothering whether you love your neighbor. Act as if you do. And as soon as you do this, you're going to find one of the great secrets. When you are behaving as if you loved someone, you will presently come to love him. What a profound insight. Okay, you may not feel like you love the people around you. You may not feel like there is an emotional or relational connection between you and your coworkers, you and your friends, you and the people who live in the houses right around you. Okay, I'll bet you can do that. Why don't you begin to behave like you love those people, the way you wished people loved you? Just start to act that way, and I'll bet you'll find that what C.S. Lewis said is true. Your heart and your feelings are going to come along for the ride eventually. Would you pause here at the end of the message? And I'd love for you just to have a moment in the quiet where you can articulate to God in your own way your commitment to this second great commandment and living it out with purpose and mastery and self-direction. After a moment of you giving God some space to speak to you or you praying to Him, I'll pray for us all.